straight away. It's the man himself. It's Mr. Brexit. It's Nigel Farage. How are you?
Good afternoon, Patrick. I'm well, thank you.
Good. Happy nearly New Year to you, of course. And look, what will you be doing at 11 p.m. tonight when we finally officially leave the European Union?
I've got a helicopter booked in about 30 minutes, and I'm going to the silly hours because I want to go for a beer in a pub. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. But yeah. I tell you what, if I was a billionaire, that's exactly what I would be doing.
I don't blame you.
Well, on the 31st of January at 11 p.m, when we left the European Union, Richard Tice and I threw a huge party in Parliament Square. It was just massive fun. Tens of thousands of people, very good-natured. And to be honest with you, it would be fun to have a big public event tonight, but of course it's just not possible. So, no, I shall raise a glass. I think, to be honest with you, more in relief than celebration.
Did you ever actually believe that we'd get Brexit delivered fully? I mean, I know it was the culmination of a lifetime's work for you, but there must have been moments when you thought it wouldn't happen.
Oh, there were. I mean, during Theresa May's premiership, it seemed to me for all the world that Brexit was lost. That it simply wasn't going to happen. And can you imagine if she'd stayed on as Prime Minister and then the pandemic had come, we'd still be in. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. So we were very fortunate in one way, in that missing her deadline of March 29th, 2019 meant that we had European elections. And that was when the Brexit Party, from nothing, stormed the board, got rid of Mrs May, and that directly led to Boris Johnson. And whilst this deal is not perfect, and if I was listening to you in Northern Ireland right now, I'd be sucking my teeth. Similarly, if I'm in the fishing industry, I'm not going to be very happy. But beyond that, we are in a much, much better place than we were after that dreadful Chequers sellout that we saw from Mrs May. So I'm just relieved that we finally got over the line. And yet, sure, I've got reservations about one or two things. But this is a moment in British history, be in no doubt about it. And it only happened because the people rebelled against the establishment.
Well, look, absolutely. I mean, just on some of the negatives that you've pointed out there, we can't just have one never-ending Brexit loving here on Talk Radio. So there are negatives, clearly, to this, Nigel, and just highlight some of those and highlight some of the areas that you would have, been disappointed with in this deal.
Well, I would much rather have gone for no deal. I'd much rather have gone for a rupture, accepted the short-term pain, but been freed in every way from everything, from these dreadful people in the European Commission. But I knew in practical terms that was never going to happen because that would have reopened the split within the Conservative Party. The CBI would have gone mad and the Brexit wars would have continued. So the one good thing about this deal, number one, it's not an EU treaty, justiciable by the European Court of Justice. That's great news. And number two, it actually ends the Brexit wars because after tonight, there is no going back. We, the leavers, now own the status quo. And anyone that stands up now and says we should rejoin just gets laughed at. So what this settlement does do, it lets down a couple of groups badly, but what it does do, it ends the Brexit wars and we can move on.
Well, look, this is our Twitter poll at the moment. Should Remainers now back post-Brexit Britain in 2021? Nigel, I want your take on that. So
Lord Bamora, who is president of the CBI, right, was an absolutely ardent Remainer. Very upset with the referendum, thought a second referendum might be the way to go. He today is saying, let's embrace this opportunity and make a success of it. And I welcome that in every single way.
And so hopefully more people get on board with that. I will be speaking later in the show to Femi, of course, who has been a staunch Remainer. Having said that, no one would have known who he was, would we, if it hadn't have been for Brexit? So we should be quite chuffed, I think, that we did actually vote for Brexit. But look, what should Britain's priorities be post-Brexit? Because Boris Johnson has spoken about levelling up the country, and then I think what he turned out to mean by that was slamming us all into some kind of catastrophic lockdown. So it's an interesting take on levelling us all up. But what are the areas that we should be prioritising now post-Brexit?
Oh, a different trade across the world, number one. And number two, giving ordinary British workers a better chance. There is no doubt that the huge level of migration we had into Britain over the last 10 to 15 years lowered people's wages, made it harder for their kids to buy houses, made it more difficult to get a GP appointment. And getting back control of our borders and actually giving the British working man and woman a better chance. That's the absolute number one priority. And I think, to be honest, Boris Johnson understands that. But the truth of it is, from here on in, we're the masters of our own destiny. Whatever we get right or wrong is down to us.
Yeah, and I mean, what now for you, really? Because there are areas that we've spoken about earlier on about this Brexit deal. I mean, the fishing industry, for example, is one that surely could do with some form of improvement. Are you going to be throwing your considerable campaigning weight behind areas like that?
Oh, I want to get the super trawlers out of the English Channel. All right, this deal doesn't do that. I'm going to go on campaigning for that, and I think we'll get big public support. I also think that what has been done to Northern Ireland is wholly unacceptable. So there are individual issues that are, in my view, unfinished business. But the great rift through the country of the Brexit wars, that ends at 11 tonight. And that, I think, today is what we'll be celebrating. We have been through 4.5 acrimonious years in British political history because the establishment refused to accept the result. Now, when time and again the public have said they back Brexit, they can't do that anymore. And that's what I will, at 11 o'clock when I raise a glass, be thinking about. The people's revolution has won.
I did think when we were looking at the House of Commons there and this deal was getting passed through, what a lack of political class there actually is in that House at the moment. We've had a nightmare with lockdowns. The education nightmare is ongoing. Indeed, we're going to be talking about that later with someone who's representing parents who are essentially the big losers in all of this, I suppose, with the latest school closures, etc. Issues potentially now with a vaccine rollout. We've got cabinet ministers who aren't household names in their own homes, for goodness sake. You know, total political no-hopers there on the Labour benches. When one of them resigns, you have to check that they were ever actually elected in the first place, don't you? Do you lament the lack of political class in this country at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, this is the most talentless cabinet I've ever seen. There are some talented people on the back benches who Boris has chosen not to use. But, I mean, I can top that. I sat last night watching the Parliament channel, watching the House of Lords debate. What a bunch of dross. What a useless bunch of deadbeats. It was one of the worst displays I've ever seen. A series of completely unknown career politicians, through patronage, put in the House of Lords for the rest of their lives. I thought the whole thing was an absolute disgrace.
Well, yeah, I mean, someone who's messed it up a little bit as well, and is Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition. Someone might want to just put a dictionary in front of him and tell him what opposition actually means, because there's no danger of us finding out what he thinks about anything at the moment, is there, or what any of his policies are. He did actually back this Brexit deal. He had then some shadow cabinet resignations and people speaking out against it, of course. Is he in a bit of a mess at the moment? And by virtue of us not really having a strong opposition in this country, is the British political system in a bit of a mess?
Well, the Labour Party's split, isn't it? Horribly split. It's got these two factions. And he's got a real problem with it. I mean, clearly, he's not as scary as Jeremy Corbyn, but he has to remember that a large number of his members are Corbynites. So he's got a difficult course to navigate. And I understand why he did what he did yesterday. And he was right. It was a binary choice yesterday. It was accept this deal or go for no deal. So, I mean, that I do understand. But look, I think our electoral system gives us political parties that are almost always by their nature coalitions within their own parties. And I think some form of PR would actually give us political parties that said what they thought. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be. Nigel, there's some reaction here on Twitter at Talk Radio. You can join the party as well, of course. Nigel just saying now there are a few issues still need to be dealt with next year. Unfair treatment of Northern Irish unionist super trawlers as well. Couldn't agree more. That's from Jamie on Twitter. Our Twitter poll is flying as well. Thousands of you have already taken part in this, which is should Remainers now back post-Brexit Britain in 2021. 92% of you are saying yes. Is it time that we all pull together? But get yourself on the airwaves, of course. 03444 991,000. We're called Talk Radio. Let's hear you talking. Now, Nigel, just want to move the discussion on slightly from Brexit. And there was, of course, the New Year's honours list that was announced this year. I was expecting maybe to see your name on there. Instead, we were treated to Lewis Hamilton, a man who has been awarded for services to driving very quickly. What's all that about?
Yeah, and Richard Corbett, former Labour MEP and bag carrier for 5 years to Herman Van Rompuy. It just sums it all up, doesn't it? It sums up what I said about the House of Lords debate last night. It's placemen, it's patronage, it's desperately out of date, it doesn't work anymore, and it's in disrepute.